Let's talk to Mike Davis about all of this now. He's the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, and he's been watching this particular position very closely. Mike, good afternoon to you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if we can't have Mike Davis as Attorney General, how is Pam Bondi, do you think?
I think Pam Bondi is a great pick for Attorney General by President Trump. She is very experienced as an attorney. She's been an attorney for decades. She looks younger than she is because she's a very beautiful woman, but she was the Attorney General of the state of Florida for 8 years, and a very successful Attorney General. That's a big job, right?
Yes.
One of the biggest states in the country, and she was a successful Attorney General, so she knows how to run a big government agency. And so she'll bring that outsider experience to Washington, D.C., and that's exactly what we need. We need someone who's going to go into this Justice Department, this broken, corrupt Justice Department, at the National Security Division in Main Justice and in the FBI, and clean house. And I think Pam Bondi has the experience and the backbone to do this.
Cool. That's encouraging. I do wonder how transferable the skills of a state attorney general are to the federal level, and maybe that's only known among the people who've done that very thing. But I know, for instance, Kamala Harris was attorney general in California. I wouldn't trust her to run the envelope licking operation at the White House. But Pam Bondi, AG in Florida, you think those skills will come in handy?
Well, sure. I mean, look at who becomes successful presidents. You have governors, you have business executives. Those are the most successful. Those are the most successful presidents. And I think the same thing can be said about bringing an outsider who's run a big AG office in a state to bring that same mindset into the federal government. And she'll have good help. She has Todd Blanche as the nominee for Deputy Attorney General, a former federal prosecutor who's been President Trump's attorney against this lawfare by the Biden-Harris Justice Department and these state and local Democrats for the last 2+ years. You have John Sauer as a very successful Supreme Court advocate as President Trump's nominee for Solicitor General. So she'll have a very good team to support her, like any attorney general will.
Yes. How hard will that Justice Department bureaucracy fight against the people you just mentioned?
Oh, they'll do it every second of every day. But the difference between this time and the first time that President Trump went into office is President Trump is going in eyes wide open, right? After experiencing 8 years of this unprecedented lawfare, this unprecedented election interference, this crossfire hurricane bogus investigation they opened up on then candidate Trump and hobbled his first presidency. And so he's coming in. Remember when Trump won the first time, he had never run for office. He had never served in government. He was a novice, right? Now he's a pro. He knows what he's doing. He's hiring the right people. He's not hiring the swamp creatures. He's hiring people from outside of Washington, D.C. to go be the senior leaders on his Justice Department team. I'm very excited about his FBI pick. I hope he picks Kash Patel, and that will really rock the FBI.
Yes, it will. And I know, speaking of things that the system will fight back against, picking Kash Patel would be a provocation, to say the least.
And that's exactly what the FBI needs. The FBI needs wholesale reforms. The director needs fired. The deputy director needs fired. And all these assistant directors at the FBI, including the assistant directors in charge of the key field offices like the Washington field office, all need to be fired. We need new leadership, fresh blood at the FBI. The FBI has been corrupted. Remember, we had reforms to the FBI after J. Edgar Hoover, where they had term limits up to 10 years. And somehow that became a 10-year term, which is not what Congress intended. The whole point of the up to 10 years is to make sure that this most powerful agency in Washington, the FBI, along with the CIA, don't get corrupted by leadership that's been in office for too long. And so there needs to be a house cleaning at the FBI and the CIA.
What's going to change about the Justice Department's relationship to the president this time? Because I remember last time, after President Trump fired James Comey, and rightfully so, That triggered the launch of the Mueller investigation and all this sort of ridiculous anti-Trump behavior by the United States Department of Justice. There was all this preaching about, oh, the president's not supposed to wield any influence over the Justice Department whatsoever. How do you think President Trump's view of the Justice Department has changed since that era?
Well, I don't want to speak about President Trump's view, but let me just tell you what I would advise him. And I would say this. You were elected by the American people. The President of the United States is elected by all Americans. Trump won in a landslide, 312 electoral votes. He runs the executive branch, including the Justice Department. The Attorney General reports to him. The Deputy Attorney General reports to the Attorney General. The FBI Director reports to the Deputy Attorney General. They are all accountable politically to the President of the United States, right? He's accountable to the American people. He runs the Justice Department. There is not an independent Justice Department, independent from the duly elected President of the United States. I can't think of anything more dangerous than an independent Justice Department that's not accountable to the President of the United States. That's exactly why we have the problems we have now at the Justice Department, because we have these nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Main Justice, career officials in Main Justice and at the FBI who think that they're not accountable to anyone other than what their values are. You know, they think that their values or what they think justice means is the North Star. Well, that's complete nonsense. So these narcissistic Looney Tunes are in for a very rude awakening because the President of the United States will run the Justice Department.
Would you advise the president to get involved in picking which investigations, for instance, the Department of Justice should undertake? And I don't mean across the board. I mean areas of special focus. So, for instance, the president would say, like, hey, we've got a huge human trafficking problem in the United States. I want the Justice Department to devote resources to that, or political corruption, or abuses within the Justice Department itself. Is that the kind of thing that you expect might come from the White House now?
It should. And Mark Paoletta has put out some really good pieces on this, how in prior administrations, that not only has the president done that, the president has ordered specific investigations and indictments, right? And that is within the president's power. And I would say this, that if I were advising the president, I would tell President Trump to issue an executive order that we're done with all this January 6th nonsense. All these units, January 6th units, are being shut down. We're going to pardon almost all these January 6th political prisoners and defendants, and we're going to commute the sentences for the rest, right? Because nothing that happened on January 6th should have caused anyone to go to prison for 22 years. It's just your typical DC uniparty mindset that they think that January 6th was the worst attack on America since the Civil War. It's just utter insanity, just out of touch with reality. And I would also say that the president should order the Justice Department to focus on immigration and violent crime instead of all this other woke nonsense that they're doing. And guess what? If these career officials at the Justice Department, including the DC U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, if they don't like that policy directive from the President of the United States, if they don't want to follow a lawful order of the President's, or as Attorney General, they should resign and they should run for Congress. But unless and until they do that, they need to follow policy directives and lawful orders of the President and his Attorney General, or they should be fired.
I want to move to the other big legal issue of the day, which is up in New York, that Judge Juan Merchan today has granted President-elect Trump's request involving the sentencing. There was supposed to be a sentencing coming, and now there will not be. That sentencing has been postponed indefinitely. Juan Merchan has asked Trump's attorneys to file by December 2nd a motion for dismissal. Is that motion for dismissal of the entire case?
Well, it should be. There are so many reversible errors in this case, and Juan Merchan has known this. This is the same corrupt judge who sat on this case when his daughter is being paid by Kamala's campaign, when his daughter's fundraising off of this unprecedented criminal prosecution of a former and likely future president. This guy's corrupt. And the fact that he let this case get as far as it did shows you how corrupt he is. Now he saw, look, the American people heard these bogus allegations. They heard this bogus evidence, and the American people delivered their verdict on November 5th. This lawfare needs to be done. It needs to go away forever. And frankly, the Trump 47 Justice Department should open a criminal probe on this, because this is a criminal conspiracy against rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241.
So this is where I wanted to go next. I want to know about this because Juan Merchan has not had a reputation for ever siding with President Trump in any capacity up until now. In fact, throughout the trial, he kept issuing gag orders in violation of the president's First Amendment rights and attempted to stop him from even mentioning during his campaign the extent of the lawfare against him, which is his right as a citizen to do. And yet now he is saying, well, this case may be potentially dismissed now in its entirety. If that's the case, do you sense that Juan Merchan is trying to cover his tracks in anticipation of a Trump-led Justice Department?
I would say this. If you look at 18 U.S.C. Section 241, when government actors collude, conspire with amongst themselves or with private actors like Andrew Weissman, for example, to violate someone's constitutional rights, violate an American's constitutional rights, that is a very serious federal civil rights felony, right? And that's exactly what 18 U.S.C. Section 241 is about. And when you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement and judges' chambers to go after political enemies for non-crimes, I can't think of how 18 U.S.C. Section 241 would not apply squarely in that circumstance.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And, it's also amazing that this week of all weeks, Alvin Bragg is attempting to delay Trump's sentencing all the way until 2029 to have him have that hang over his head, while at the same time they're trying to throw a Marine, Daniel Penny, in jail for being a good Samaritan on a train and standing up for the women on that train. And they want to throw him in jail for a long time. Alvin Bragg is running a ridiculous operation in New York.
Yeah, Alvin Bragg is the Soros-funded Manhattan DA who campaigned on getting Trump. He had Matthew Colangelo come from the Biden Justice Department to bring this bogus, unprecedented criminal indictment against Trump for the non-crime of a businessman settling a nuisance claim and putting it in his private books as a legal expense. I don't know what the hell else you would call it. That somehow turned into 34 campaign finance felonies. This is obvious lawfare, obvious election interference, because right after Trump won this election, all of these Democrat prosecutors and judges and other operatives are cutting bait. Why is that, right? Why are they doing that? It's because it's obvious what they were doing all along was to try to interfere in the election.
And the idea, lastly, of delaying the sentencing all the way through Trump's presidency until after he concludes his second term, wouldn't that be a violation of his Sixth Amendment rights to a speedy trial? How can you have a sentencing hanging over you for 4 years?
Oh, and it's just a sword of Damocles over Trump's head. So if Trump's a controlled assets as the president of the United States, we won't move forward with this sentencing when he's done. But if he does things that angers us, like, for example, investigating Crossfire Hurricane and this Democrat lawfare, we're going to have this sword of Damocles over his head. Look, this judge needs to declare a mistrial. This case needs to go away. All of these cases need to go away. And if they don't, the Supreme Court of the United States, I expect, will step in very quickly and end all of this.
Yes. And by the way, the Supreme Court already said that President Trump's time in office and his official actions are out of bounds for a criminal assessment. And yet that court relied on in-office activity as a part of the verdict. In other words, like, there's yet another reason that this case should be thrown out entirely. It's just
let's look at this. And Merchan has known about that presidential immunity decision since June. Why is he waiting 6 months now to finally say, maybe I should look at what the Supreme Court said? It's because Trump won the election. He's proving, this Judge Merchan is proving that this has always been about election interference. He could have issued this order back in June after the Supreme Court ruled.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've noticed Jack Smith is doing the same thing. All right, thank you very much. As always, Mike Davis, phenomenal. Always good to talk to you. Please have a great weekend, sir.